Hello all. I am coming up to the 14th anniversary of being all clear of cancer, and I thought in honour of that I would do a couple of story time videos for you, really just kind of going through my experiences. Now if this isn't your kind of thing, please do feel free to click away, but if there are ladies out there who are possibly faced with the choice of having a hysterectomy or not, and you want to know a little bit more, be forewarned if you like, then please do keep watching. I'd had 6 months of investigations following an abnormal smear. I had a colposcopy, let's loop excision, and it was found that I had cervical cancer. And they went through the various options. Because I was very young, they were concerned about early onset menopause and osteoporosis. Had I been of a mind to possibly want children in the future, the plan was that they would have just taken the cervix. Now, I've never ever wanted children. It's never been a part of my life plan, but I was very aware of the fact that I could change my mind. But at that moment, if it was a case of life or children, then, you know, the option of having children really wasn't an issue for me at all. And I was perfectly happy to proceed with a laparoscopically assisted vaginal hysterectomy, along with a lymphadenectomy, so the removal of the lymph nodes in my groin. As it turned out, when they eventually got into my abdomen to perform the surgery, even if I had have originally opted for just the cervix being removed, they would have taken the womb as well, because the cancer had actually started to infiltrate into the womb. My surgery was not straightforward, but that's for another time, and my recovery was not straightforward either. I had about 2 years of various issues. I had a mass in my hip that, to start with, they couldn't identify. They didn't know if it was metastases or what was going on. That was very worrying. It turned out to be what's called a lymphocele, and it was basically just a sac filled with lymphatic fluid, which I went to an alternative therapist to have sorted out. They were also concerned at one stage with the state of my ovaries. So I had to have more scans to sort my ovaries out. They realised that I actually had just got naturally lumpy ovaries. So from the very beginning of the investigations up to the point where I had the operation, and then for 2 years after that, I had many and various investigations, which basically entailed me lying on a hospital bed with my legs apart, while somebody stuck something inside me for a scan of one form or another, or, you know, opened me up with a speculum and had a good look round and a good poke round. And if you've had a smear, ladies, you'll know just how uncomfortable and unpleasant it is. And it can also be quite degrading. You can feel quite violated in a way. Now, I appreciated all the time that this was for the benefit of my health, but it just got to the point where it felt that my very private area had become, you know, public property. Anybody and everybody could have a good look down there, because I was in hospital and it was nurses and doctors and, you know, MRI technicians and radiographers and ultrasound technicians and etc., etc. It took 2 years post-op for me to get the physical okay, you know, you are physically now okay. And because I had been concentrating on my physical recovery so much, it never occurred to me the mental and emotional impact that that particular operation was going to have had. Having been told that everything in terms of my physicality was now fine, that was when my brain went into meltdown. And it occurred to me that I was no longer a whole female, that I was damaged and therefore somehow less. Now, I have a pal who is male to female transgender. As far as I'm concerned, she's female, that's it. End of story. So when you put my attitude towards that person compared to my attitude towards myself, it makes no sense. My rational mind knows that there's more to being a woman than, you know, internal biology. But I wasn't rational at the time. I was emotional, I was hormonal, and I was completely illogical. And I truly felt that I was damaged. I was less. And I was incredibly depressed. My mum has a lovely support group of ladies at her church, and one of the ladies, all of the ladies, were asking how I was getting on, and my mum was telling them about how I was feeling. And one of the ladies in the group said, "Oh yeah, I can understand exactly how she feels. I was exactly the same way after my hysterectomy." The lady was at the time an 83-year-old spinster of the parish. She had never been married, she'd never had children, never wanted to do either. And she'd had her hysterectomy in her either late 50s or early 60s for fibroids, I think, possibly endometriosis, I don't recall. So she was already past childbearing age anyway. And yet she had felt the same. That she was somehow no longer a whole woman, that she was somehow no longer complete. She was damaged. And as a result of that, she was therefore less valuable as a woman. It's nonsense. Logically, it's utter nonsense, but that's how she felt, that's how I felt. And the next time that I went off to the outpatients clinic, I spoke to one of the nurse practitioners there, and she said, "Oh yeah, that's very common. It's a very common occurrence after hysterectomy." Oh, okay. So why wasn't I warned that this could happen? This emotional meltdown could suddenly happen. Why wasn't I warned about that, if it's so common? The other thing that occurred to me was the fact that I could no longer have children. Now, as I've already said, I never wanted children. I was never interested in children anyway. But up to and including October the 24th, I could have changed my mind. As you know, you hear women do. You wake up one morning, your body clock's going mental, and I have to have a baby. That hadn't happened to me at any point, but it could have done, and I accepted that it could have done. As of midday on October the 25th, I could have changed my mind, and that would have been tough luck. And again, I think it wasn't so much the fact that I could no longer have children as it was the fact that it was no longer my choice. And there were people around me who just did not get it, particularly my partner of the time, who was about as much support as a spaghetti fence post. It was like, "Oh, you never wanted kids anyway, what's the problem?" And a lot of people were like that. You never wanted children anyway, so why does it matter that you can no longer have them? Because it wasn't my choice. I no longer had a choice whether I had children or not. It took me a while to get over that. And it wasn't the actual having children, it was the loss of the choice. And again, when I spoke to other people who've been through similar operations to me, it's like, "Oh yeah, we felt that way too." And again, it's one of these things that apparently is, very common, but one of those things that you're not warned about. This next bit may get a little graphic, so there may be those of you who feel that this is not perhaps suitable for younger ears. Another big issue that I had, obviously, post-op, was down to my relationship at the time, and my partner of the time was very keen that the physical side of our relationship should resume as soon as possible. Now, let's be absolutely blunt here. I had spent 2.5 years on my back on various beds with my legs splayed while various people shoved something inside me and wiggled it about for one reason or another. And pretty much every time it happened, I got hurt. It hurt. It was uncomfortable, it was unpleasant, it was degrading. So even when you're with a caring and considerate partner, what is sexual intercourse in its basic form? It is you as a woman lying on a bed with your legs akimbo while someone shoves something inside you and wiggles it about. Well, of course, my subconscious wasn't having any of that, because for 2.5 years, every time anyone went near me down there, I got hurt. So I would freeze up. I would just completely freeze up. And it caused a huge problem. I had a condition that is known as vaginismus. And it is up here predominantly. And it is basically that your body just freezes up because of that fear of being hurt or something similar. Again, as I say, my partner at the time was less than sympathetic, and basically his thoughts were, well, I wasn't getting it from him, so I must have been getting it somewhere else, which is utterly ridiculous. It wasn't that I didn't want to have sexual intercourse with him, it's that I didn't want to have sexual intercourse with anybody. It was a relief that I didn't have periods anymore, because I wouldn't have been able to use internal protection, wouldn't have been able to have tampons. If you're familiar with a pair of jeans at the crotch where you get that seam, that double seam, even if I pulled my jeans up too swiftly sometimes, or I got the angle wrong, I would just be on the ceiling. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. I went to my GP about it, and I was put on the waiting list for psychosexual counselling. I was on that waiting list for 18 months before I even got assessed. And that was only that short because my GP at the time happened to be friends with the lady who was in charge of the psychosexual counselling service. So I kind of jumped the queue in a way. There were various exercises that I was given as part of my psychosexual counselling course. And I won't go into those details, but suffice it to say that I actually discovered internally a spot that was sore all the time, regardless. And it was that spot that was causing me pain every time I had an internal exam, every time I had an MRI. There was this one particular area that was painful. In terms of sexual intercourse, it would not matter if my partner was extremely patient, used lots of lubrication, took their time, blah blah blah. It was still going to hurt because there was damage inside, there was nerve damage inside. I had options of either taking gabapentin for the rest of my life or for using a local anaesthetic cream on that spot for half an hour to an hour before intercourse, which of course kind of takes away the spontaneity. But also with both of those particular remedies, it would have been a case of you wouldn't have felt pain, but wouldn't have felt anything else either. And, you know, that side of the relationship is not the be-all and end-all. And in terms of mutual pleasure, there's more than one way to swing a cat, shall we say. So that was something I wasn't prepared to do, either of those, really. Of course, it caused issues with my partner at the time because he was very, to put it bluntly, penetration focused. It was everything else, and that, you know, there were other things, of course, as I've said, there's other things that you can do, but they were always as well as, rather than, instead of, and it caused, or it didn't cause, it was part of the cause of the eventual breakdown of that particular relationship. Again, having spoken to other people who've been through similar situations to me, it is not uncommon that you have these psychosexual issues, the whole idea of being physically intimate and private with somebody after you have been so publicly exposed. It's a real head fuck. One of the things that I did as part of my psychosexual counselling was to go out and buy myself some very pretty underwear. And of course my partner at the time was like, well, who are you buying that for? Because I ain't seen you wear it. And he could not get his head around the idea that it wasn't for anybody else. It was for me. It wasn't about being sexy. It was about feeling feminine again. It was about reclaiming my private area for me again. So, you know, take care of the hygiene and put pretty bits of lace on top of it. It was always all about me, and it was about me being able to feel comfortable and confident again as a woman. And it took a long time, and it didn't help the attitude of say, his attitude at the time. It did not help at all, and it was part of the reason that the relationship eventually failed. Why am I telling you this? Basically, ladies, because forewarned is forearmed. Had I known this was all possible, it wouldn't have stopped me having the hysterectomy. Ultimately, the hysterectomy saved my life. There's no way I wasn't going to have it, but had I known that these things were possible, if I'd known that these feelings, these emotions, this mental upheaval was going to happen or was possible, then at least I would have been prepared for it, and I would have been able to get the support in place before I went ahead with the operation. There's been a couple of ladies that I've spoken to who have opted for hysterectomies themselves for various medical reasons, and I've warned them that these things may happen, these feelings may happen, and they may not happen straight away. Talk to your partners, talk to your husbands about vaginismus, talk to them about, you know, that ultimately, physically, there is no difference between penetrative sex and having a probe stuck up your fanny because you need an MRI scan. Physically, there is no difference, and you're going to need a lot of help and a lot of understanding and a lot of support, possibly, to be able to resume a normal sexual relationship. I don't want this video to put anyone off having the hysterectomy if that's what you need, but please, please do make sure that you have your support mechanisms in place before the operation is scheduled. My next video will be about my near-death experience. We're coming up to Halloween. It's kind of appropriate, really. Until then, take care. Bye.